Greetings, friends. Welcome to this live stream for Empty Cloud Monastery. I hope you're well wherever you are and whenever you're watching this Dhamma session. I'd like to start as usual by paying homage to our teacher, the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Yena himanyati tato tang hoti anyata. So welcome again, everyone. Today's topic is the world. Quite a big topic, but actually what I'm going to be sharing today is a sutta which is called The World, Loka Sutta. And this sutta is found in the Udana, which is a very beautiful collection in the minor collection of discourses, Khuddaka Nikaya. Udana is the collection of the heartfelt utterances of the Buddha, or exclamations of the Buddha. So it's a really interesting collection, and this beautiful sutta that I'm going to share with you today comes from the time just after the Buddha became enlightened. And he initially, sitting under the Bodhi tree, he meditated for many days, we're told 7 days, for a full week, without moving at all, and just in a way reviewing and, we could say, enjoying his sense of freedom, his breakthrough, his ability to rest, peacefully, free from greed, hatred, and delusion. He spent 7 days in this state of bliss, of well-being. And then he emerged and he cast his gaze around the world. And this sutta tells us how he spoke at that time, or how he thought at that time. Don't ask me how this sutta was recorded. Let's assume that the Buddha shared with others, with disciples later on, this experience that he had. And so I'd like to read you Loka Sutta, Udana 3:10. And it begins like this. At one time, when he was first awakened, the Buddha was staying at Uruvela, at the root of the tree of awakening, on the bank of the Niranjara river. There the Buddha sat cross-legged for 7 days, without moving, experiencing the bliss of freedom. When 7 days had passed, the Buddha emerged from that state of immersion and surveyed the world with the eye of a Buddha. So friends, I feel this is really pertinent for us to just hear, just take in. How does a Buddha view the world? What did he see? He saw sentient beings tormented with many torments and burning with many fevers, born of greed, hate, and delusion. So that is what the Buddha sees when he looks at the world. I find that quite a powerful reflection for us, isn't it, friends? What does he see? He simply sees the burning and the torment, strong words, the suffering, the dukkha of everyone, essentially, who's not enlightened. We're all tormented. We're all burning. What are we burning with? What is tormenting us? It is desire and aversion and confusion, ignorance. The Buddha goes on to say, then, understanding this matter, on that occasion the Buddha expressed this heartfelt sentiment. He went on to say, this world, born in torment, overcome by contact, speaks of disease as the self. Roga, disease, atata, as the self. So this sense of self, any sense of self that we have, of being something, someone, of continuity, of personhood, anything that's me, that's mine, that's myself, is a disease to the Buddha. And we are clinging, we're aligning ourselves, we're associating with that disease when we find ourselves attaching to a sense of self. Rogo, it's a disease. This sense of self is a disease. This world born in torment, overcome by contact, speaks of disease as the self. So we're overcome by contact, overwhelmed by contact. It's very interesting to consider this. We often find ourselves, don't we, seeking out contact, seeking entertainment of one form or another, mental stimulation, sight, sounds, smells, taste, touches, and cogitation, concepts, thinking. We actually gravitate towards these things. But the Buddha oftentimes gave us the impression, clear impression from his teachings, that we're actually overwhelmed by contact. We want to, if we're wise, reduce the amount of contact for that reason, restrain the sense doors, restrain the amount that we take in. Can we be aware of that overwhelm? Can we be aware, like the Buddha said, like a cow that's been skinned, such a painful image, that is being assailed by mosquitoes and flies and creeping things. Everything that touches that body creates great pain, great suffering. And we don't necessarily perceive this, but the Buddha is telling us that all this contact, all this input, this relationship, this enormous sensitivity that we have is a cause of overwhelm and great suffering for us. So just to take this in, just to consider this, these first words of the Buddha as he emerged from his attainment of complete and full enlightenment. This world, he says, born in torment, overcome by contact, speaks of disease as the self. For whatever it thinks it is, it turns out to be something else. This beautiful teaching of two lines. Yena yena hi manyati tato tang hoti anyata. Manyati, imagining. Whatever we imagine, whatever we assume, whatever we consider as true, as reality, as how it is, the truth, reality is always other, anyata, it's always other than that. What a beautiful teaching. I find this so helpful when we consider how we cleave to views and opinions and we identify with what we think we know. Let's remember, many times in many places the Buddha said this, whatever we think, whatever we conceive or imagine reality to be, it is always other than that. And in just this way, regarding contact, something that we seek out often, that we enjoy, that we relish, we delight in, the Buddha's telling us, no, this is suffering. When we look around the world and we see all the goings on, the Buddha's telling us this is torment, this is pain. So it's very interesting. We can't necessarily experience this all at once, but we can consider this teaching from the heart of liberation, nibbana, seeing samsara, you know. The Buddha went on to say, this world is attached to continued existence, overcome by continued existence. Again, that sense of being overwhelmed, of being duped in a way, confused and distracted and lost in this world of continued existence. We're overcome by continued existence. This world is attached to continued existence, taking pleasure only in continued existence, yet it becomes something else. So the pleasure that we can experience in becoming, in being, in continuation of this experience of being, it becomes something else. Pleasure doesn't last. Pleasure turns to pain. The Buddha goes on to say what it enjoys, what is enjoyed, that is the fear. And what is feared, that is the suffering. And so there it is, the crux of our dilemma, that all that we can enjoy here, the pleasure that can be had, turns into loss. So the fear is that we have to experience the end of that delighting, the end of that pleasure, the end of that well-being at some point, and there is the suffering. And so this isn't always clear to us, of course, but we can remember as Dhamma practitioners, can't we? We can just become very steady, very stable, very calm and clear around this, that the peaks of pleasure and the peaks of pain are not to be inclined towards, made much of. Let's remember they don't last, and whatever's pleasurable will turn to pain, and whatever's painful will turn to pleasure or something neutral, and there's this endless cycle. And if we're caught up in the cycle, it's perpetual. It just goes on and on. It is overwhelming when we really consider this. We can wisely observe. Take up the eye of the Buddha. He's telling us, this is the place, this is the way to see the world. Just consider the endless cycles from pleasure to pain, from pain to pleasure. And in the seeing of that, in the understanding, and in the willingness to pay attention to the way it is, so we cease to dwell in a world of imaginings, manyati, a world of creation, looking for the next fix, essentially, looking to get away from the pain and to move towards pleasure. We stop being fooled into doing this, and we start to observe the whole gamut, all the torment arising and passing, all the suffering within this realm of ceaseless activity, ceaseless seeking, ceaseless selfing. We can start to step away, open to wisdom, see with the eye of wisdom, the eye of the Buddha, see the dukkha arising and passing. And in this way we can come out of samsara slowly but surely. The Buddha goes on to say, this spiritual life is led in order to give up continued existence. We're not making anything of the situation we find ourselves in. Rather, we're observing, learning from, letting go of every experience in order to free ourselves. And this is a journey that requires great faith, because we don't know where we're heading. We just know what we're letting go of. So there's the renunciation, friends. To cultivate renunciation, right intention, is to really take up and make much of the Buddha's teachings and develop faith, develop confidence in these teachings, so that we're willing to, step into the unknown again and again as we give up the known, the imagined that it is. We give up the imagined. We recognize we don't know, we can't see, clearly. Reality is not apparent to us yet, but we're willing to let go of what we think we know in order to free our hearts from suffering gradually. It's this willingness to step into the unknown that is path. This spiritual life is led in order to give up continued existence. The Buddha goes on to say here, of the ascetics and Brahmins who say that through continued existence one is freed from continued existence, none are themselves freed from continued existence, I say. So there's nothing, friends, in this world of appearances that is going to free our hearts from suffering. There's no way we can find peace and find clarity if we're continuing the round of suffering, if we're invested in samsara. This is a radical teaching. The Buddha's teachings are liberation teachings and require us to let all of that go. Any sense of continuity, any kind of eternalistic views, any sense of a self that moves forward through time, all of this is to be let go of, all the views, all the opinions. There's no way otherwise we can liberate our hearts from suffering. There's nothing here for us, is what the Buddha is really saying, isn't it? There's nothing here for us. All is to be let go of. He goes on to say, of the ascetics and Brahmins who say that through annihilation of existence, one escapes from continued existence, none have themselves escaped from continued existence, I say. And so this other extreme, from eternalism, this kind of bhava tanha, this becoming energy, the desire to be in samsara, we're never going to free ourselves if we pursue this kind of energy, becoming energy. And also, conversely, the other side of the coin, vibhava tanha, if we incline towards rejection, aversion towards samsara, if we're pushing samsara away and resisting samsara because we actually have maybe a little bit more wisdom, but we have aversion in the heart, we still have a relationship with this thing that we're creating. We're still pushing something away. So we're still reifying, we're still creating, we're still immersed in samsara. So to let go of any kind of annihilationism, nihilism, any kind of negativity towards samsara is also our work as practitioners. And we can see ourselves, can't we, swinging. Oftentimes when things are going well for us, we'll always incline towards more becoming until we've rooted out bhava tanha in the heart, that becoming energy. When things are not going well for us, when we're suffering, there's the inclination to vibhava tanha, to want to get away from it all, to be free from this, but with aversion, with a negative aspect, a pushing away quality. And in this, we're equally trapped in samsara. So to either move towards or to reject and have resistance towards reality, neither of these will free our hearts. The only way we can free ourselves is through letting go of bhava tanha, becoming, the craving to become, and also vibhava tanha, the craving to get rid of. These points are a lifetime of practice and contemplation for us, because we can observe our tendency towards reifying, towards becoming, towards eternalism, something wanting, something to last, something to exist, something to have some kind of solidity in this world of dissolution and change. You know, we can see that tendency in ourselves, and we can see the tendency to resist. It's very much, these energies are background states for us. And the more we practice, the more we can see that these are really strong inclinations in the heart, and we can work with them. We can see, am I, a resistant type? Am I a person who tends to push away things, to want to get away from things? Or am I a person who wants to immerse in the world? And we can notice that over time we'll veer from one to another, and both are to be let go of, both are to be worked with. Nibbana, liberation, transcends these types of craving that we experience, and we can only get to the place of freedom through recognition, understanding, and seeing the suffering there. The Buddha goes on to say, for this suffering originates dependent on all attachment. With the ending of all grasping, there is no origination of suffering. So everything that we attach to, there is the suffering, whether we're rejoicing in or rejecting, whether we're desiring or hating. It's that relationship that is the cause of all our suffering. And so all of it is to be seen through, let go of. And with the ending of all the grasping, we can then appreciate the ending of suffering. So it's very interesting just to see that, in a way, the simplicity of this, that it is the source of suffering is the grasping, is the desire. It's the second noble truth, isn't it, friends? Tanha is the cause of all our suffering. And the third noble truth, the way out of suffering, is the complete eradication of that desire, or aversion, is the uprooting of that tendency. The Buddha, of course, went on soon after this time to teach the Four Noble Truths. So this was his first expression of this understanding for us. He then says, just look at this world, mired in all sorts of ignorance. Beings in love with being are not released from continued existence. Whatever states of continued existence there are, everywhere, all over, all are impermanent, suffering, and perishable. So this is the crux of the Buddha's dispensation, this message for us. And it really does ask us to be willing to, if we want to be free, if we want to really experience peace, to be willing to let go of absolutely everything that we cleave to, everything that we hold to. How simple and how challenging and how profound this teaching is. Cutting through. Let the wisdom that we accumulate over time in our practice be like a sword that cuts through our attachments, that renders them obsolete through insight. He then speaks in verse, in this Udana 3:10, the Buddha gives this verse. He says, one who sees truly like this, that is, that all states of existence that we may experience are impermanent, suffering, and perishable. One who truly sees like this, with right wisdom, gives up craving for continued existence, while not looking forward to ending existence. Extinguishment comes from the ending of all cravings, that is, Nibbana, comes from the ending of all cravings, fading away and cessation, with nothing left over. There is no further existence, for that mendicant extinguished without grasping, victorious in battle, such a one has defeated Mara. They've gone beyond all states of existence. Ayan. So this teaching is really very powerful. The first utterance of the Buddha after his enlightenment, and within it there is the path for us. There is all the guidance that we need to remind us to keep forging ahead, keep letting go, keep noticing where there's suffering, noticing where we're getting stuck to things or we're resisting reality, and keep letting go. So I'd like to, really encourage you to have a read, look it up again, have another read, and let this teaching percolate through. Udana 3:10. The Buddha, having surveyed the world in this way and having seen the extent to which beings are immersed in tormenting themselves and others, burning with the fevers of desire and aversion, he considered that it might not be such a great idea to try and do anything about it. It will be very difficult, very arduous, and possibly quite fruitless. And so he inclined towards silence, as many enlightened beings in the past have done, and in the present and also in the future. Pacceka Buddhas, those who are silent. Many liberated arahants, fully liberated beings, not with the kind of extent of the understanding of a Buddha, but nevertheless, those who've uprooted greed, hatred, and delusion in their hearts. Some may offer teachings, many will be silent. The extent of this task of opening the Dharma eye for others, the enormity of it, really gave the Buddha, after all his strivings as a bodhisattva, we're told, for countless lifetimes, it really gave him pause, and he considered giving up on that, vow that he'd made over so many eons, as we're told, so many lifetimes of striving. But fortunately, he was implored, begged by God, Sahampati, the god, to not rest back, but rather to please give the Dharma, because there are some who have little dust in their eyes. And so the Buddha taught, and he created the monastic Sangha. He gave women and men the opportunity to devote their lives to the Dharma practice and to live in the way that he lived as a mendicant, to roam around homeless, and both practice for liberation, letting go of all attachments to this world, and also help and support others in doing the same. So his dispensation, we know, was incredible. His life was incredible. He spent 45 years then tirelessly teach until the age of 80. And so many women and men became his disciples. So many became monastics, monks and nuns. And yet, the Buddha had a lot of difficulty with the ignorance of both his disciples, his family, people around him. He tried to intervene in wars between his own families. His mother and father came from neighboring regions that ended up at war with one another in the lifetime of the Buddha. He tried to intervene and was ignored. The monks community, famously in Kosambi, got into disputes that the Buddha was unable to encourage them to settle. They couldn't hear the Buddha, can you imagine, in their midst. They carried on quarreling and fighting. And so the Buddha could see very clearly how tormented sentient beings are in this world, and how difficult it was for us to practice for liberation. And he did his best. And I'd like to share with you, there are 2 suttas in Majjhima Nikaya that took place in Kosambi, which is the place where this famous quarrel took place in the monastic Sangha over some trifling matter. Factions formed, and the arguments and the fighting, presumably verbal fights, went on For really quite some time we can gather. Initially, the Buddha tried to offer teachings, wonderful teachings, which I'd like to share with you, about how to create harmony, how to avoid strife, how to stop tormenting ourselves and each other. But the monks at Kosambi didn't really have the capacity to hear him and to take in the teachings to the extent that they could harmonize. And so in the end, the Buddha was actually invited by one of the arguing monks to just leave them to it. Please leave us to it. We'll sort this out ourselves. And so they sent the Buddha away. And I'd like to read you from, let me see if I can find it. It's Majjhima 128, Upakalesa Sutta. So the Buddha tried to offer teachings, encourage them to stop fighting, and he was invited to leave. So he went away. And this is what he had to say at this point. Many voices shout at once, yet no one thinks that they're the fool. Even as the Sangha, the group, splits, they think no better of the other. Dolts pretending to be astute, they talk their words out of bounds. They blab at will, their mouths agape, and not one knows what leads them on. So this, friends, is the Buddha speaking about monks who are caught up in the torment of their views and opinions. And I find it very poignant that firstly, that a Buddha in the world couldn't prevent, couldn't stop the burning of samsara. He could only offer the Dharma to those who were willing to try and come out of that fire, try and stop tormenting themselves and others. But he could do no more than that. It's for each one of us to find our way to peace and well-being and ultimately liberation. And so that I find very poignant. And also these words of the Buddha, they're so timeless, are they not? Describing the ways in which we fight and how it is that we get caught up in our views and how it is that we dissociate, go up into our heads, the blabbing at will, the mouths agape, not one knows what leads them on. We lose it, in short, and we're capable then, when we're lost in our delusion, caught up in some pocket of confusion, what can we not do then? There's no limit, to our ability to hurt and harm ourselves and others. And we see this in the world around us. We see this in the geopolitical field. We see this in communities. We see this especially between nations, the inability to get out of the bubbles, to see the other's bubble, to see where the other's coming from, to actually speak to one another, to actually have some kind of diplomacy between peoples, to settle their grievances and to stop harming one another. And when these pockets and bubbles of reality clash, we end up with wars, we end up with all sorts of physical action, creating even more hurt and harm, violence and brutality. And so it really is very sobering to consider the Buddha, at the time of the Buddha, the very same issues were there, and he could only speak the Dhamma, and people, if they had any inclination towards peace, could listen, lend ear, and strive to uproot these causes of torment in ourselves. So he goes on to say these beautiful verses from the Dhammapada, friends. They abused me, they hit me, they beat me, they robbed me. For those bearing such a grudge, hatred is never laid to rest. They abused me, they hit me, they beat me, they robbed me. For those who bear no such grudge, hatred is laid to rest. For never is hatred laid to rest by hate, it is laid to rest by love. This is an ancient teaching. When others do not understand, let us who do understand this restrain ourselves in this regard, for that is how conflicts are laid to rest. So here we have the formula for peace. Peace within and peace in our communities, peace in our world. If only, friends, if only these verses were kind of posted everywhere and brought to all the conferences and meetings and, discussions and diplomatic gatherings, to all the peace talks. If only people could take on these teachings and recognize what we all know, that more harm, more hatred only creates cycles of violence, of vengefulness, of, hurt people flailing at one another. And if we make much of our history, in a way, if we allow ourselves to dwell in our grievances, then we're lost. We can only find harmony through letting go of those grievances. Forgiveness, which of course is not forgetfulness, but is the willingness to overcome the negativity, the trauma, the pain and suffering here. And so these verses are worth considering again and again, aren't they? And we may feel that we're living peaceful lives as practitioners. We try and harmonize with people around us, but we can be observant and just notice when we get riled. It could be something we read in the news, it could be some view that we hold to tightly and we don't want to let go of, and we can get argumentative over if that is challenged. We can just see if there are any places, any situations where we are struggling to maintain a sense of harmony. And we can also, of course, notice in ourselves, most importantly, this is where it starts, so we can see where there is friction, where there is holding, where there is an argument within ourselves, and give that importance, make the imperative, the focus, the place where our energy is, the place where we put our attention. Let it be that place, let it be those places where there is a lack of peace here, where there is some strife here. And so these beautiful Dhammapada verses to be considered again and again. Never is hatred laid to rest by hate, it's laid to rest by love. This is an eternal teaching, an ancient teaching. And so the call for metta, the call for loving kindness, in the midst of strife, in the midst of pain and suffering, in the midst of ourselves feeling put upon, feeling harmed, abused even, in the midst of that, the call is to bring up loving kindness, to bathe the entire situation, the heart, in loving kindness. This is the only way to have the resource, the strength, the ability to let go of hatred and to put our grievances to rest. I'd like to finish, friends, with the uplifting teaching that the Buddha gave the monks in Kosambi. In the midst of their arguments, before he left them to it, he gave them a most beautiful teaching. We can be very grateful to those arguing monks who eventually resolved their dispute when the lay people decided to stop offering them alms because they'd driven the Buddha away. When the lay people made that decision to stop supporting them with the requisites, they very quickly resolved their differences. Thank goodness they found their way to harmony. But we can be grateful to them that they prompted this teaching from the Buddha. And I'm going to read this to you. It's from Majjhima 48, Kusambhya Sutta. So the Buddha here gives the 6 factors of communal harmony, which many of you will know, I'm sure. How to promote harmony, how to live in peace with one another. And we can take this as living in peace here, living in peace in our small groups that we find ourselves in our communities, our households, our family groups, our collective Sangha, spiritual communities, work communities, and so forth. And also we can consider this as how to do our part, promote in whatever way we can peace in our world, peace in the wider sphere, peace in our nation, peace between our nations. This is the teaching for community harmony in all these different aspects. The Buddha says, Blessed One addressed the monks. Monks, these six things are polite, create affection and respect, and lead to inclusiveness, non-contention, harmony, and unity. This is the way to live in a civilized manner with one another. And from politeness and affection to harmony to unity. Here, a monk establishes physical actions based on loving kindness in regards to one's co-practitioners, both publicly and privately. This is one thing that creates harmony, creates unity. So to have a heart of loving kindness for one another. And that, of course, is to be extended as widely, as far as possible. This is another factor for communal harmony. One establishes verbal actions based on loving kindness in regard to all those around us, both publicly and privately. This is another thing conducing to harmony. So what we say and how we speak, can we imbue our speech with loving kindness? Can we have a heart of loving kindness from which all that we say emerges, so that our words are coloured, our words are free from any kind of barb, from any kind of harmful intention. And people feel, don't they, what is behind the words. So if we have a heart of loving kindness, we will be able to rely upon and trust that our speech will reflect that and promote unity in the community. Thirdly, one establishes mental actions based on loving kindness in regards to others, both privately and publicly. So publicly, it's really important, is it not, for us to maintain a heart of loving kindness? One could also add in the other Brahmaviharas to bring in compassion where it's appropriate, bring in rejoicing in the goodness and the good fortune of others where it's appropriate, and to have a heart of equanimity. These qualities, these divine abidings, will all help us to act and speak and think in wholesome ways, harmless ways, to promote unity. Also privately, when we're in the absence of others, certain others, to speak and think and act as if they were present, to avoid any kind of backbiting, to avoid any kind of divisiveness within our hearts, not to behave differently when we're alone than when we're in public, to have the same attitude of harmlessness. This is to be authentic, to have integrity, to seamlessly promote the good, and also helps us in our attitude towards ourselves, that the loving kindness should be established, can be established, is wonderful to establish towards this one as well as all those around us. So these 3 factors for promoting communal harmony, if only everyone observed or tried to observe this way of being, to have loving kindness in our speech, in our thoughts, and in our actions. There's more. There's 3 more factors that we can work on, that we can cultivate in our lives. Fourthly, to unreservedly share with our friends, those around us, any possessions that we have acquired properly, even for the monastics, to the contents of the alms bowl. So to share, in short, this is not just a teaching for monastics. We can extend this teaching to all of us, can we not? And appreciate the crux of this 4th quality, this 4th way of promoting unity and harmony, is for us to share. If we could only share resources, if we could only have a willingness to be generous with one another, can we work against the tendency to hoard and to grasp and to look out for ourselves? And if we extend this to nations, how beautiful it would be if we could negotiate to work, to share. The Buddha's families fought over water. They fought over the contents, really, of a river that bisected their communities. There may have been a shortage of water. There may have been a drought. It's very difficult for human beings not to start fighting when there's a shortage of resources. But if we were to consider this quality, this training for harmony, the exhortation from the Buddha is to share, to do our best, to equally divide, to not have those with and those without. How painful is that? To actually share the land, to share the resources. What a great teaching for us all and for the world. Fifthly, the Buddha says, to live engaging both publicly and privately in virtuous behaviors, which are unbroken, undamaged, unstained, unblemished, liberating, praised by the wise, free of grasping, and conducive to peace. To live a good life, to keep the precepts. So as Buddhists, we're very fortunate. We have this clear guidance from the Buddha to keep the 5 precepts: avoid killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and any kind of intoxicants to cloud the mind and make us way more vulnerable to doing any of these unwholesome things. We're very blessed. We have this container. If only everyone in the world had this container. Many people do have precepts to follow. Thank goodness. Most of the world religions promote goodness, promote virtue. How important it is. If everyone followed the precepts of their religions, then we would be fine. We'd have a harmonious world. But it's very difficult for human beings to do this. We may do it on a personal level and find that we fall short on a national level. All of us can play our part to promote virtue. Virtue is the 5th quality that conduces to unity in the world. And 6thly and lastly, when living with one's companions, wherever we live, in whatever communities, to maintain both publicly and privately a perspective which is noble, salvific. This is Bhante Siddhaso's beautiful translation. Salvific, that which is liberating and correctly leads the one who keeps this perspective to the elimination of suffering. So the 6th aspect that conduces to harmony and peace in the world is the practice for liberation. Not everyone we know, not everyone in the world is practicing for liberation, but we can appreciate that this way of living, this training, following the teachings of the Buddha for liberation is the way ultimately to bring peace into the world. And we can take heart from this and keep practicing, give much attention to the practice, don't fall short. Life is so short. let's make the most of the limited time that we have, friends. So I'll finish here. Awan, thank you for your kind attention. I'll have a look at the chat and want to welcome those who are here live. Good to see you all here. Greetings, to Sean. Hello, Manal, Madeline, Louis and Rebecca. Good to see you all, as it were. John and Sud, next gen. Esther Silva, good morning. Niranjan Tiladar. Suma Shwath Suma, very good to have you with us. Thai friend, Gregory, Amaranta, Venerable Gyanaratna Bhikkhu, Sadhu Sadhu, good to see you, Venerable. And Hai Eng Yu, who has a question, I'll come back to. Rebecca, hi Rebecca. Norma, Bhumika, Edward, Olga, welcome all, friends. I'm going to go back to the questions that I've spotted. Please forgive me if I haven't spotted your question, friends, as we go through. So from Haiyang, we have a question. Why is it possible to forgive others, but very difficult to forget the evil done to us on purpose? Yeah, ouch, Thank you, Haiyang. It's very hard, isn't it, to forgive cruelty and sadism and sheer wickedness on the part of others. Why do people hurt one another? It's because they are confused, they're ignorant. What we can recognize, friends, is that when somebody hurts us willfully, consciously and cruelly, they are hurting themselves still more. It's very, very painful to create bad karma, to create the causes of future suffering. It's really very painful. To be a victim of cruelty is also very painful. But we, in that victimhood, in that receiving of suffering, we're not creating unwholesome karma for ourselves. So we can heal. That is our work, to heal, to work with the pain and the suffering and the mental anguish that we feel, and to really practice with a lot of loving kindness and give time and space for this healing. Slowly, we don't forget, we don't necessarily fully put aside what's happened to us, but we can come to a place of peace, a place of well-being, and that is our work. And it's a real work, not an easy job, but a job that can be done through following these teachings. For those who harm and hurt others, it's much harder to come out from that shadow, from that darkness. And if we really see things clearly, we can begin to even appreciate their dilemma, the sort of hell that they're creating for themselves, and have compassion for that. And that can be part of the healing over time, to appreciate, just where it is the other person is coming from and what state they're in and what future they have. This sounds like I'm creating people and creating futures for people. It's not really quite like that. It's just that harmful intention, cruel intention surely creates great suffering. And that is something we want to very clearly steer away from ourselves. So to seek revenge, of course, is something so foolish, something so painful. But to seek to heal and to forgive in this way of mending and overcoming the suffering here, this is a wonderful work. And we grow so much compassion this way, and our wisdom and insight grow along with that compassion. So I really wish you well with that journey, and to be able to focus on the impact here for yourself and see how, your attitude towards those who've harmed and abused you will change over time. Let the compassion emerge. Yeah. Thank you, Hayang, very much for sharing. And we have another question from Hayang. Thank you again. She says, he says, do you agree compassion without wisdom is stupidity because others will take us for granted and treat us like fools? It's a very good question. Yeah, it is really wise for us to protect ourselves. Look at the Buddha, looking at the world when he became the Buddha and what he saw. We can appreciate that this world is full of suffering, and people who suffer torment themselves and torment others. And so it's really helpful for us to have the wisdom to protect ourselves and to see the danger of association with those who are creating whole fires around themselves, who are tormenting themselves, who will torment others because they can't do it any other way at this point in time. We can allow our compassion to open our hearts to the other who's suffering, and allow our wisdom to create the kind of protective shield that we need at times to avoid being hurt or harmed ourselves. Actually, I feel that loving kindness, compassion, equanimity, and joy, these divine abidings that we can cultivate within our heart, are a source of great protection for us. But wisdom, most surely, is important here to see things clearly, to know when to step forward and when to step back, to know how to help but not get ourselves into trouble in that offering of assistance. It's a huge field. I might come back to it again in the future. Thank you very much, Hayang. Okay, Rebecca's talking. Thanks, Rebecca, for your comments about the Mahabodhi temple, where the Buddha was enlightened, yes, under the Bodhi tree, and that there's a conflict between Buddhist monastics and Hindus about this site. This is a very good example, I feel. Thank you, Rebecca, of the confusion in this world and the, how to say, the, in a way, crowding. As human beings, we're quite, we're sort of falling over one another at times. There are so many of us on the planet at this point in time. There are so many struggles between human beings, between groups, between nations over resources, and this is liable to get worse, I guess, over time with the climate emergency that we're in. There is, and always has been, a lot of struggle over places, lands, and resources. And we can see how easy it is for us to fall back on a kind of tribalism, to fall back on animal instincts, to get what we need to survive, and how this gives us an opportunity to really see the danger in samsara, to see the truth of the Buddha's eye that looked around the world and saw nothing but suffering. Let this, friends, be a prompt for us. All the fighting, all the conflict, all the inability to share, all the inability to see the other, to hear the other, to harmonize with the other. Let that be a prompt for us, a strong, urgent prompt for us to practice for liberation. I think I'd like to finish, and apologies for all the comments I've not brought up for the group here, because time's running out. But I'd like to finish just to mention how it was that when the Buddha left the quarrelling monks in Kosambi, he made his way to a forest, and there were 3 monks practicing Anuruddha, Kimbila, and Nandiya. And these 3 monks were living together in harmony. And the Buddha spent time with them and taught them. And these 3 monks became fully liberated, became arahants. And he asked them how it was that they were able to live together in harmony. And one of the things they said that has resonated with me throughout my monastic life, community life, is they said, well, in order to maintain harmony, we consider we have our own wishes and our companions have their wishes, and we choose to put our wishes aside and to harmonize with their wishes. This beautiful quality, which is imbued with so much loving kindness, so much politeness, so much respect, so much willingness to let go, this way to harmonize, friends. Can we encourage in ourselves and also in others the willingness to put aside our views, put aside our wishes, even put aside our needs at moments when that is helpful, and look at the other and see what they need and see what their world is and see if we can harmonize with that. This doesn't mean breaking precepts, doing anything harmful. Actually, just the willingness to see the other, to hear the other, to change, allow oneself to change in order to harmonize with the other as best we can, promoting the good. This would be so helpful, would it not, in the world? If only all arguing, fighting nations could do this. They have to do it at some point. This is the love that is the only cure for the hatred in this world. So I think I'll finish with that beautiful teaching from Anuruddha, Kimbala, and Nandiya, the three monks who the Buddha said blended together like milk and water in their way of living. Ayya. Let's finish, friends, with three heartfelt sadhus, honouring and respecting our teacher, the Buddha. Sadhu, 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 animadami.